It was just an ordinary day for a young man named David until he decided to visit a pet store in his city. He didn't have any specific plans or intentions. It was just one of those spontaneous decisions that pop into your head and you can't help but agree. As he stepped into the pet store, what he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. The animals in this pet shop were no ordinary creatures. They could talk. At first, it was adorable, very cute, and something that made you go, "Oh, wow." But then it took a turn when they started sharing some pretty embarrassing truths about their owners. David couldn't believe his ears. He wondered if he had accidentally wandered into a parallel universe, or if he was dreaming. All the animals, from the birds to the dogs and even the fish, seemed to be having conversations of their own. But it wasn't just casual chit-chat. They were discussing their owners, revealing secrets and habits that had David feeling a little uncomfortable. He found himself in a pet store where every animal had a story to tell, often at the expense of their owner's dignity. And while it was all happening right in front of him, he was frozen in place, unsure how to react. The sight before him was like nothing he had ever experienced. Dogs who had been silent throughout their lives were now engaging in lively debates. Cats who were known for their aloof nature were gossiping in hushed tones. Even the birds in their cages were commenting on their owner's appearance. David felt a mixture of amusement and disbelief. He had always loved animals, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined they would reveal such intriguing insights into their owners' lives. He couldn't understand what they were saying, but their body language and tone of voice conveyed everything. The cats were judging their owners, the dogs were teasing them, and the birds were simply adding fuel to the fire. One particular conversation caught his attention. A pair of Yorkshire Terriers were sitting in their cage, discussing their owner's latest date. Apparently, she had brought home a mystery man, and the dogs had been observing them through the peephole in the bedroom door. As David listened in, he couldn't help but chuckle. The thought of his owner's dates being discussed by her dogs was amusing, yet slightly embarrassing. Then there were the Siamese cats lounging on a shelf. Their conversation was a bit more judgmental. They were commenting on the size of their owner's new puppy. One cat remarked that the puppy looked like a small dog, while the other suggested it might even be a chihuahua. David could sense their disapproval. They clearly preferred the company of other cats and weren't too fond of sharing their space with a canine. He walked further into the store and noticed a group of budgies in a cage singing a song about their owner's morning routine. Their cheerful singing was accompanied by funny hand movements as they described her clumsiness and inability to wake up on time. David couldn't help but laugh. It was as if these birds had a front row seat to his owner's life. But not all the conversations were light-hearted. In another corner of the store, David overheard two parrots discussing their owner's recent argument with his wife. The parrots were mimicking the voices of the couple, and it was clear they found the whole situation hilarious. It was a reminder that not all conversations among the animals were as innocent as they seemed. David realized that he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. This pet store was no ordinary place. It was a hub of gossip, secrets, and hidden stories. Every animal there seemed to have a tale to tell, and their words were filled with wit, sarcasm, and sometimes even cruelty. But it wasn't just the animals that fascinated him. It was also the way they interacted with their owners. It was like watching a different world, where pets weren't just beloved companions, but also keen observers and commentators on human behavior. For example, David had seen firsthand how his dog reacted when he came home with a new haircut. The dog had greeted him with a mix of confusion and disapproval, whining and scratching his ears as if to say, "What have you done?" It was clear that the dog missed his old haircut and wasn't afraid to show it. He remembered the time his cat had brought a dead bird inside as a gift. Instead of being disgusted, he had admired the cat's hunting skills and even buried the bird in the garden with respect. The cat had purred with satisfaction, knowing that its offering had been appreciated. These experiences had taught him that animals weren't just pets, but they were living beings with their own personalities, thoughts, and feelings. And in this pet store, he was witnessing that in the most extraordinary way possible. He had come across many interesting conversations between animals and their owners. For instance, he had heard a woman being scolded by her parrot for wearing the same dress to a party twice. The parrot had squawked loudly, much to the embarrassment of its owner. But it seemed these birds had excellent memories and weren't afraid to call out their owners for their mistakes. He had also witnessed a dog comforting its owner after a breakup. The dog had whined and licked the person's face, as if sensing their sadness and wanting to help. It was a touching display of affection and loyalty that had brought a smile to David's face. But not all the conversations were so heartwarming. He had once entered a room to find two cats hissing at each other. When he asked his friend why they were fighting, the cat had replied, "She's talking about your mother." It turned out the cats were discussing their owners' family members, and neither of them had anything positive to say. It was then that David realized these animals weren't just pets. They were social creatures with their own opinions and biases. And like any social group, they engaged in gossip, judgment, and even criticism. He had discovered a secret world where pets were more than just silent companions. They were active participants in their owners' lives, observing, commenting, and sometimes even influencing their behavior. In this pet store, David had found a community of animals that were far from ordinary. They were chatty, opinionated, and unafraid to speak their minds. They were a reflection of the diversity of pet owners and their quirks, and David couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with them. He realized that in this world of talking pets, he wasn't alone. There were others who understood the joys, challenges, and surprises that came with having a pet. After spending some time in the pet store, David knew he had to share his experience with others. He wanted to spread the joy and wonder he had discovered, but he also wanted to warn them about the embarrassing secrets these animals could reveal. He began by telling his friends about the talking animals, but they thought he was joking, so he decided to bring them to the pet store. When his friends stepped inside and heard the animals talking, they were shocked and amused. They couldn't believe that they had been skeptical of David's story, and they were eager to explore the pet store further. Together, they explored the pet store, listened to the animals' conversations, and shared laughter and amazement. David's friends were equally surprised and delighted by the parrot imitating their owner's morning routine. The dog discussing the size of the new puppy, and the cat commenting on their owner's choice of outfit. As the day went on, David's friends couldn't stop talking about the unique experience they had shared. They marveled at the wit and intelligence of the animals and the insights they had into their owners' lives. Some of his friends even found common ground with certain animals. For instance, the bird enthusiast among them spent a long time talking to the budgies, discussing different species and exchanging stories about their own feathered friends. As the sun began to set, it was time for David and his friends to leave the pet store. They said their goodbyes to the animals, promising to return soon. On their way out, they couldn't help but look back at the pet store, wondering what secrets and conversations they would discover next time. From that day forward, David and his friends became regulars at the pet store. They looked forward to their visits, eager to immerse themselves in the world of talking pets and the funny insights they offered into their owners' lives. They continued to share their experiences with others, spreading the joy and wonder that came with discovering the secret language of pets. And whenever anyone doubted their stories, they knew exactly where to take them: the pet store where animals talked back.